If I had a nickel for every television show in recent years shot in Canada that featured a very tense sibling relationship as a centerpiece, where David A. James Elliott played their dad, and it also featured CM Punk as a guest star, I'd have two nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice. Hi there, Deadpool Negative fans. It's me, Deadpool Negative, again. Um, as for how crappy I look, I'm working on it. But I wanted to get in before the third episode aired because I wanted to watch the first two episodes before I came to a conclusion. Um, about what I wanted to talk about was the new sci-fi series Revival, which, like Resident Alien, is an adaptation of a comic book series. Unlike Resident Alien, Revival is much more faithful to the source material, much more faithful to source material, but also does a few different things than the comic did. But I'm going to talk about Revival, the first two episodes of Revival, because I was sort of disappointed with the second episode of Revival. With the first episode of Revival, and I wanted to see if the second episode corrected my issue, and it actually did. So, Revival, which ran from 2012 to 2017, created by one of my favorite artists, Tim Seeley, and also one of my other favorite artists, Mike Norton, the man who gave us Battle Pug. There, it is a zombie story, kind of. In Wausau, Wisconsin, which is Seeley's hometown, people who died in a certain period of time that all died suddenly come to life and start walking around. But they're not really zombies. You can't hurt them. They don't rot. They don't really have any have any they seem to be in control of their mental faculties until they get stressed out, and then they start acting really strange. They don't eat flesh. They don't look right. They just wander around like they just want to get back to normal. They get wounded, but they heal quickly. It's a kind of a Highlander thing. And at the center of this series are two siblings, M. Cypress, a kind of like rebellious young daughter, college kid, not really sure what she wants to do with her life, kind of angsty, and her older sister Dana, who is the deputy of Wausau, and their father is the sheriff. What's interesting is like I read Revival in trades years ago, and I wish I could bring out the trades, but my back is killing me, and I don't feel like looking for points of comparison. I'd almost forgotten about the father character, the sheriff of Wausau, and in fact, like when I looked at him, I'm like, he was never in the comic. Then I looked up some old issues, and I'm like, oh wait, he was. But basically, M is trying to get to the bottom of why all these people are coming back. It's getting out that these people are coming back. In fact, like it eventually becomes a national. It gets declared as a national security threat, and the CDC and the military get involved. And there is a reason for all of it happening. There is a person behind it all, but also M and Dana are more connected. Well, M especially is more connected to what's going on than either of them realize. And it's about like I think what resonates about the series, it's about like if you had what if you had a second chance when you didn't even know you needed a second chance. I know that's a strange way of putting it, because I'm trying to avoid a massive spoiler that happens at the end of the first episode. That mirrors exactly this comic. I mean, the way I'm dancing around, you could probably figure it out already. But okay, like I said, unlike Resident Alien, this series is very similar. Resident Alien takes the basic premise and then jumps off to make a frustrating series. I'll put it that way. As for the show, the co-creator of the show, and I always like kind of twitch when I see this. Like the series is created by Aaron B. Koontz and Luke Boyce, and like that's the credit. And then of course the next credit you see when the title screen fades out is based on the comic book by Tim Seeley and Mike Norton. But Em and Dana in particular, and Andy McQueen are not that different from the comic book. It's kind of like, I know it's a technical thing. I know there's a lot to do with TV contracts and something, but and Luke Boyce has been attached to this series since about 2017 when it was they were shopping it as a feature. Um, so he's been working with Tim Seeley for a while. Um, working on it. So uh, it always strikes me as weird to see like, and the same thing with Resident Alien. Like Resident Alien is created by Chris Sheridan, though in that case that actually might, because like again, Resident Alien is a massive tonal shift from what's in the comic. The comic is more like, what if Murder She Wrote was an alien? What if Murder She Wrote was and the show is Alan does his thing for 45 minutes. They both have their merit, but my problem with Resident Alien it is awfully empty calories sometimes. So once again, Aaron Koontz and Luke Boyce. Luke Boyce was actually going to directed in 2017 from a script by Seeley and a writer named Sarah Fisher, and that eventually evolved into a TV series, which I really think now rival the comic. Let me get this out of the way. I think it's a good comic. There's a one volume. It is a perfect comic. No, I think it kind of does things. It's sort of like, oh, it has an overreach. There are some problem like there were some choices I wouldn't have made, but I'm not a writer. But what I love about it is it really ends. It's one of the best. Like everything is resolved in a way that is incredibly satisfactory. You get to the end of the book and you look at Dana and M's journey, and you're like, that is the best way it could have ended. That is the best way it could have wrapped up. And I'm glad I took this journey. I have all 8 trades, but maybe I'll get the compendium when I'm done. The first, but I would definitely read it if you real. The thing is, like, again, Revival is a fairly faithful. The one major change is in the show, in the comic, one of the main characters was like in the show in the comic. Dana is the mother of a young son. Um, in the comic, the baby's father was an actual main character. They were not in a relationship; they were co-parenting, and I mean, he wasn't like a super central. So like, oh yeah, he could be cut from but like what it just kind of reminds me one of the best parts of Revival is maybe 30, 40 issues in for one brief issue. There's been a background character in the comic for like what feels like forever, who rarely gets any lines, and you open up this one issue and is completely focused on this character, her thoughts, her hopes, her dreams, her basic misery about being trapped in Wausau and like beyond the periphery of this situation. And it was like one of the best like storytelling tricks I've ever seen. And like, and it was just like probably just the fact that they had enough they had thought about what this character was in the background the whole time and said, okay, here's how she's feeling about all this. I thought that was great. And now with that baby daddy seemingly out of the picture, I'm not sure if they're going to do that. But I mean, that wouldn't be a problem. But it was just like one of my favorite things they ever did was like, oh wait, like we're gonna spend time on this person. Another thing about the show, but So that's what I have to say about the comic. I'm going to talk about differences, other differences. For one thing about the comic, there was humor in it, but it mostly came from the way Mike Norton draws facial expressions, and he's one of the best in the business. In fact, Mike has a new Kickstarter up for his Battle Pug series, which is the greatest mashup of Conan and a giant and pugs you will ever read. There is no greater comic about Conan riding a pug in human creation than Battle Pug. But one of the things Mike Norton has always been incredibly skilled at, and I can't really remember the first time I saw his artwork, is probably when I'm drawing the Waiting Place series with Sean McKeever, which is like how come Sean McKeever never got any of his stuff made into a movie or a TV show because it was good. He is great at drawing conversations, facial expressions, which I think is a lost art because so a lot of the humor would come from the reactions characters had, and you can't really do that. You have characters speaking, and what's interesting is the lead actress playing Dana Cypress. Dana Cypress in the comics was kind of a stoic, very and I don't mean this as an insult, a Greg Rucka-esque heroine, kind of like the stoic center of the story. The actress they chose to cast as Dana is Melanie Scrofano. Now, Melanie Scrofano is probably best known for two things. The Winona Earp series, also on SyFy, and Star Trek Brave New Worlds, where she's more convincing as a starship captain than Anson Mount. And I say that less as a slam on Anson Mount and more of a slam on the writers of Brave New Worlds. I love Anson Mount, and I think they actually have a good chemistry on that show. But what's interesting about Winona Earp is, as a series, it was based on a fairly serious premise. A law woman, fights demons. I mean, it predated Buffy the Vampire Slayer, but it was very much in that vein. I'm talking about the comic, not the Buffy the Vampire Slayer TV series, but it was very much in that vein. I mean, you can get Winona Earp pretty much on all the streaming services, and I think if the series didn't have like production issues, we wouldn't need to have a Buffy revival because we have enough Winona Earp to make us happy. But the thing is, Melanie Scrofano did on Winona Earp that kind of set her apart from, say, Sarah Michelle Gellar on Buffy, is that while she could play the badass stoic heroine, she's also very skilled comedically. There was a point where she got pregnant in real life, and they wrote it in the show. And I swear to God, this woman makes binge eating hilarious looking. And so we get a more like comedic, subtle take on Melanie Scrofano can make shoving food, like putting a donut in her mouth, funny looking. I don't know how she does it. And as I understand, and I googled interviews with Ms. Scrofano about why she decided to do the show, and she said one of the producers worked on Winona Earp, and I said, sure, I'll do it. That's how much she loves Winona Earp. It is funny, like, we're getting a new Buffy, and for years I said to myself, if we're gonna ever get a new Buffy, they're probably gonna get the Winona Earp people to do it, and instead it was somebody else, which blew my mind. But so what we're getting out of Dana is a more light. Light isn't exactly just more, because she's also remarkably expressive. Like at the end of the first episode, Dana basically has her world completely upended on her, like completely flipped over, and she's got to hold two genuinely horrible ideas in her head at the same time. And Scrofano like really nails the absolute horror of what's going on without saying a word. And I think that's really I can see why she was drawn to it. Like, that's because Winona Earp was also about a woman, a seemingly normal woman who had to contend with the most ridiculous shit imaginable that the budget will allow for. And I definitely say his Revival is a better looking, probably better funded series than Winona Earp, which had, like I said, production issues over its run. Um, like in my head, she's like, if you put like, but her, yeah, she was definitely a very good choice to play Dana. And we have Romy Weltman as M. And if I'm going to talk about my issue with the first episode is that M is so much on the periphery of what's going on that we really don't get to know her. In the second episode, we do. And like I said, M has a connection to the proceedings. She doesn't really realize what it is. I mean, and I don't want to say what it is because I really think you watch the first and second episodes back to back, which you can on YouTube. You kind of get I not to say like they should have aired as a 2-hour block. I just think they really complement each other because M is on the really on the periphery of the action for most of it. They introduced a new character, a roommate for her to talk to, which I think was a good choice. The actress playing the roommate is pretty funny. And I want to talk about some other things. I think David James Elliott as Wayne is pretty good. Now, I made that joke earlier about 2 nickels. A few years ago, there was a show on Starz called Heels. It ran for 2 seasons. It was actually, now that I think about it, not shot in Canada. It was shot in Atlanta. But it felt, it was Stephen Amell. So, but it was about Stephen Amell as a guy trying to keep together a rickety local wrestling promotion. I think it's one of the best shows of the past 10 years. And on that show, there was a very contentious brother relationship between Stephen Amell and his brother as this guy who ran this kind of promotion that was just dying because local wrestling is dying. And his brother, who was talented enough to probably go into the WWE one day, and his need to keep his brother there to keep this thing alive, and his brother's need to like live his own life. And I honestly think it's particularly the first season, all the second season's good. It also ends on it's one of those shows that ends on a massive like cliffhanger, but also is thematically perfect. Like it ends in a way that like it ends in a way that like a character is in a very bad way, but it makes a logical endpoint for the story we've been watching. When Elliott played the father of those 2 characters. Now, he wasn't a regular on that show. He only appeared a few episodes, but I really think in these post-Jag years, Elliott has become a really good actor. And in those episodes of Heels that he appeared, again, it's hard to explain, like, but here he makes for a very strong presence. I think he's actually more interesting than the character was in the comic book. He's trying to like keep it together, but like, how can you keep it together? The dead are coming back to life, and they're like Highlanders. And I think he does a good job of like, he wants to be a good grandfather, he wants to be a good father, but he also has this job, and the mayor. I can't recall the name of the actor playing them. It's Conrad Coates. We see the mayor briefly, and he's kind of like a guy who's trying to like sort of use it as how do I put this? He's trying to act like nothing's wrong. It's kind of like the Jaws mayor. He's trying to like, but it's like, and he does, and he's trying to basically sweep it all under the rug. But like the way Coates plays him, he's charming enough. Like you see him briefly, but the way Coates plays him, he's charming enough. While you don't like him, you understand where he's coming from. if you're faced with something unbelievable, why not try your best to just keep it under wraps? So I did enjoy that character, that little bit. But like I think Elliot, and rounding out the cast of regulars anyway, is Andy McQueen as Ibrahim Rahman, the CDC guy who's sort of Dana's love interest for a while, but mostly guy investigating. I think he does a very good job with the character that he's comedic. The character was probably the most out and right comedic character in the early goings of the comic, and I think McQueen does a good job of making the character kind of awkward and goofy without making him stupid or like I think he does a good job of threading that needle. And we also have it was kind of funny because like I'm the guy that like spent college watching nothing but bad Canadian sci-fi TV. And I noticed, oh, there's Lenore Zahn. Oh, there's Derek McGrath. Oh, there's Mark Little. Okay, that's because I watch Picnic Face. I think if Koontz and Boyce follow the template for the comic, I think they can get at least 3 or 4 seasons of material out of this. And I'm assuming the first season is about 10 episodes. I do want to say one thing. If you watch, also Stephen Ogg shows up in the second episode as a character that was a villain in the comic, but is kind of, in fact, they actually have him in the interview saying, this guy is different from the way I played him, the way he was written in the comic. Stephen Ogg shows up as a villain from the comics, but he plays him in a very different way. And which I thought was actually pretty good. As a guy who's sort of like faith has been shaken or altered by all this, and I think TV is actually a good place to like explore quietly how a person's faith can be be changed by this. Maybe not as well as comics do. It's like, I mean, it was kind of funny when I realized like I was a big fan of Preacher when I was a teenager, when I was in college. And then like 20, 25 years later, after that show, that comic ended, I realized not only did it actually not really explore its stated premise, I mean, that was the misdirection, but there were 2 series, the actual adaptation of Preacher and Supernatural, that actually explored its premise better than I think Preacher might have done if it was really about what it said it was about. And the thing about Preacher is it's not about what it says it's about. And one more thing, and I have to like, I'm gonna say that if you read the comics, someone who read the comics, someone shows up in these 2 episodes briefly, and there is a person who started all this, and this person appears, I'll say briefly, in one of these 2 episodes. And it's kind of funny because now the way Seeley seeded that character, once it's revealed, it was so obvious that character was the person who did it. It was just the way the character was portrayed by Seeley and Norton threw the audience off. But if you actually look at everything that person did and said over the course of the series before the reveal, well, who else would have wanted to do something that insane and sickening? Of course. Of course it was that character. For that reason. So it's gonna be like when I used to like walk in when I was living with my parents for a time. Game of Thrones was running, and I would kind of make a habit of sitting there with my dad at the end of every season and just kind of like go, and he'd look at me and he'd know that I knew it was going to happen, and he'd just, you son of a bitch, You son of a bitch. That's not what he said, but that's what he was thinking. Anyway, I think if they keep up the quality and if they stick thematically to what this is about, I think Romy Weltman in the second episode, we really get to know more about Em. It's really from more her point of view, and I think Romy Weltman really nails it. And at the end, the central relationship between Dana and Em is kind of the soul of the comic, and I think Scrofano and Weltman definitely are making sure it's the soul of the show. So if you're into that sort of thing, siblings who love each other but also kind of hate each other, stuck in a crazy, insane situation, I would recommend this series. And if, like I said, if it sticks to the general outline of what Seeley and Norton did, if Koontz and Boyce stick to that outline, you're gonna really love the series by the time it's over. Anyway, that's all I had to say about that. I will talk to you guys next time. I'll talk to you later. See, I got stuff in the hopper. I'm just medically not as bad as I was, but still not up to speed. I will talk to you all later. Bye.